One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. All right, Coach Mazey, so you're on the road right now to do a couple days of recruiting, and I know the mountains over in West Virginia can play with our reception a little bit, but we will knock out as many of these as we can as we talk about the discussion around the playing season for baseball. And with the College World Series going on in Omaha, obviously this is a really timely topic. And I want to really just let you dive in on all the conversation that's been going on about this issue. So currently we have a 14-week season, 56 maximum number of games starting in mid-February. But why do you believe a better model exists for the sport of baseball?
Well, I think for a number of reasons. Number one, I think college baseball is a huge untapped resource, and the time of the year that we play creates a lot of issues for us, from national exposure, from a student welfare standpoint, taking care of the kids, a competitive equity standpoint. I think there are a lot of reasons why it makes a lot of sense to move the college baseball season to the summertime. Number one being, if you look at all the fan interest polls across the country, college baseball is ranked pretty high on people's radar as something that they are interested in. Yet at the same time, I had a pretty prominent athletic director tell me about 6 months ago that currently, as far as television viewing audience in college athletics, baseball is currently fifth behind football, basketball, women's softball, and now lacrosse. So it just doesn't make sense to me that we have a lot of people that are interested in our game, yet not many people are watching it, and in the big scheme of things, not many people attend our games.
And specifically, Coach, do you have a scheduling model that you prefer? Because some folks are talking about, let's just move the season back a couple of weeks and play further into June. Others are talking about, let's make it a full summer sport. Where do you stand specifically on the right model?
Yeah, I developed a model. When I first started this proposal about 8 or 9 years ago when I was coaching at TCU, I started it because my son was born. My first son was born. He's 9 now. And I thought, man, if he's ever lucky enough to be able to play college baseball, I hope he's not like I was. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Everybody told me, man, if you're serious about college baseball, you need to go south and play. And, you know, the longer I'm in this game, I think the more I'm realizing that that's a shame that there's so many great schools in the northern part of the country that why would you limit your options? But you really have to. If you look at the proposal that I did and the number of teams that make the College World Series from the northern half of the country versus the southern half of the country, and the number of teams that get at-large bids from the north and the south, there's a huge disparity. And I just think that given the right circumstances, think about what schools like Ohio State or Michigan or places like that could do if we played college baseball in the summertime. And I had aspiration of, you know, it may take 10 or 15 years, but maybe Michigan baseball could be what LSU baseball is, or Mississippi State, or an Ole Miss, or the teams that just are really blowing it out of the box as far as, the atmosphere surrounding college baseball.
You're giving me an easy lead into my next question, and you mentioned developing this proposal while you were at TCU, and you have been at a number of, traditional baseball powers, Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, all as assistants, of course, head coach at East Carolina and assistant again at TCU before heading to Morgantown to oversee West Virginia's program. All of those previous to West Virginia, of course, are warm weather environments predominantly. Why would those types of institutions come around to your way of thinking on when this game should be played within the calendar year?
Well, that's the tricky part because it's not much of a secret that those schools have an advantage over the northern schools. And, the way coaches feed their families in this profession is to win games. And if an advantage exists, then why would you give it up? And that's the toughest part. I've done my best to try and convince people, let's do what's best for the sport and not for your particular institution. And think about this in terms of what would you like this sport to be after you retire? And if your children have an opportunity to play, or if your children have an opportunity to coach, there's so many more doors that would be open if we opened this sport to the entire country. And, one of the driving forces in this was I looked at all the programs in the Big Ten at the time I did this proposal, and their closest minor league team geographically to their campus, and the difference in attendance numbers in those two programs. And the numbers are astounding. I don't have them with me. I'm on the road right now. But, for instance, the Lansing Lugnuts up in Michigan, I think it's A-ball. But I think at the time of my proposal, they were drawing, 5,000 people a game for their home games in A-ball, when Michigan and Michigan State weren't drawing that many combined. And I contend that everybody who sits at a Lansing Lugnuts game is either a Wolverine fan or a Spartan fan, and it just doesn't make sense for people that come to a college baseball game on March the 18th on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock when it's 38 degrees outside. I wouldn't go, and I don't know anybody else that would go. So we played our biggest rival, Pitt, in the backyard brawl 2 years ago. That's what we call it, the backyard brawl, in the third week of March. And when the first pitch was thrown, I was coaching third base. When the first pitch was thrown, I counted 18 people in the stands. And if we played that game in the third week of June or the third week of July, it'd be hard to find a ticket to that game because it's for obvious reasons. The weather's great. It's not a school night. It's a social event. It's all the reason in the world to go to it in the summertime as opposed to the wintertime.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics at play here, but that single variable that you mentioned is pretty interesting to consider. In your model, what happens to College World Series timing, the Major League Baseball draft, and then, one of the most romantic times as a student athlete, college baseball student athlete, what happens to summer ball?
None of those are affected all that much. The College World Series, in my model, is played the first 2 weeks of August. And I don't think attendance would be affected. The people from Omaha love the College World Series so much. Why would they not go in August when they're currently going in June and July? And as far as the draft goes, I think we should leave the draft right where it's at and let kids be drafted in June, finish out the college baseball season, let the clubs negotiate with them after the college baseball season is over, and they have 2 weeks before school starts to negotiate and sign a contract. As it exists right now, the 8 teams in the College World Series probably have, 35 or 40 drafted kids playing for them. So playing college baseball as a professional draftee is not that much of a stretch right now. And in my model, with the College World Series being played in August, the majority of teams would be finished playing in the middle of July. So you're only talking about a small percentage of kids. I think the actual if I can call it, the sexiest part of my proposal is that I've reserved July 4th weekend as rivalry week in college baseball, where, you know, Clemson and South Carolina can play a 3-game series on July 4th weekend. Ohio State, Michigan, Florida, Florida State, and all the big rivals out there. And, you know, if you sit back and think about it, you know, the reason that athletic directors may be a little hesitant is because they may have to build bigger facilities. Because Ohio State, Michigan weekend on July 4th, you would think would attract a lot of people with those fan bases. So I just think we leave so much money on the table. And from a business model standpoint, we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg as to what college baseball is capable of doing. I mean, look at the crowds in the regionals and the super regionals. Everybody says you would lose the student population at college baseball games because school's not in session. Well, school's not in session during the regionals and the super regionals, and everybody's place is jam-packed with people.
Right.
So
right.
I just think you can fill these stadiums in the summertime.
You mentioned earlier when you yourself were a prospective student athlete growing up in Pennsylvania, and then obviously you went on, you did go south to play at Clemson. If we shifted the season to more of a summer-based model, do you believe that balances the recruiting landscape for northern-based schools, or would prospective student athletes potentially still want to go predominantly south if they're recruited in that nature because there's more of an opportunity to practice year-round and to be in a more warm weather climate? How do you feel about that angle?
I don't think there's any doubt that kids would stay closer to home to go to school. The year I did my proposal, I looked at the top 15 prospects in the state of Pennsylvania that year as rated by one of those publications. I can't remember which one. And none of them went to college in the state of Pennsylvania. They all went south. So obviously, from a competitive standpoint, Pennsylvania's best players aren't going to college in Pennsylvania. But I believe that over time, you know, Pitt, Penn State, schools like that could have really, really quality baseball programs at a very high level, unbelievable atmospheres, and those kids would be more inclined to stay home.
As we look out into the next, 6 months ahead of the ABCA convention next January, what kind of work will you be doing with your peers on this topic? I mean, is this something you're continuously pressing on, or is it going to take, the Big 12 to really get behind this, or maybe the Pac-12 who has some northern-based teams on the West Coast? Where's the tipping point here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I brought it up to all the coaches in the Big 12 at our head coaches meeting last September, and they all but one, 8 out of 9, voted to push this proposal forward and really delve into it. And as you know, there's some southern schools in the Big 12. And in my informal poll that I've done with all the coaches in the Power 5 conferences, I've got more than half of the coaches in favor of my proposal, some of which being from the South. So I think there's some steam behind it. But I don't know, Ultimately, I think the vote has to come out of the hands of the coaches. Because, as we talked about originally, the coaches all have a dog in the fight, Why would you vote to give up your advantage? So it's going to have to be done by an objective third party that realizes what is the best thing for this sport, not for each institution, but for the sport. So I look at, from a student welfare standpoint, Dr. Andrews, the world's most respected expert on arm injuries, is in support of this proposal because he feels like we're putting at greater risk of injury by playing when we do. You look at the kid from Duke last year, Mazey, the big right-handed pitcher. who in some publications was projected to be the first overall pick in the draft last year. It was worth, I can't remember, $8 to $10 million. But he hurt his arm. The last game he pitched was in the state of Delaware. Game time temperature was 43 degrees, and he hurt his arm. He still ended up, he had Tommy John surgery, I think, and still went in the back half of the first round. But that kid as a healthy pitcher makes $8 to $10 million, and that kid as an injured pitcher makes significantly less than that. And it's no fault of the coaches. I mean, you got to play. I mean, we've had to play games in 29-degree weather because if the schedule is made in the wintertime, you got to play in the wintertime. So I think from a business model perspective, a judge, the NCAA, somebody's got to look at this and say, hey, we've got such an untapped resource here that this could be an unbelievable sport. Look at the crowds at these minor league games, in A-ball and rookie ball, in the collegiate summer leagues, up in the Northwoods League where they're drawing 4,000 and 5,000 a game in Wisconsin. And in college baseball, if you get over 1,000 a game, that's considered a great crowd for a lot of people. So there's so much left on the table, and so many, like I said, so many of those northern teams could have unbelievable programs. You mentioned summer ball, the Cape Cod League and the Valley League. There were over 300 players drafted. The year I did this study, there were over 300 players drafted out of junior college, Division II, Division III, and NAIA. And you could fill up the summer leagues with really quality players out of those leagues. You could, depending on how you wanted to do it, that's a place where you could send your high-profile high school signees the summer before they come to your campus. I don't think the people from Orleans or Hyannis or Falmouth up in Cape Cod, they're baseball fans. They just want to watch Hyannis play Orleans and watch good baseball. They don't think they care where the kids come from. They just want to watch Cape Cod League baseball. So I don't think summer leagues would miss a beat. I don't think the draft needs to be changed. And I think Omaha could benefit from this.
The question that has to be asked, of course, is what are the main items of pushback you've received on the proposal, and how do you respond to those?
Well, I think one of the big things is that every time this comes up, most people's response to this is it would cost way too much to keep our kids here in the summertime. And everybody says, everybody says it would cost too much simply for the fact that everybody's always said it would cost too much. I actually put the pen to the paper and figured out exactly how much it would cost to put our entire team up for the summertime and send them to summer school, one class in each summer session, and feed them and house them and scholarship them like we currently do. And it really, one weekend like I'm talking about on July 4th with the good crowds, literally at West Virginia would pay for the entire team to go to summer school. So I said, everybody says it would cost too much. Simply because that's what they've always said. Nobody's taking the time to figure it out, to my knowledge, other than me. So one of the biggest issues that coaches tell me that they say that, well, our school would just drop baseball if that was the case. And if that's the case, then I hate to say it, but so be it. We need to, it's such an untapped resource. If people don't want to jump on the train, then they don't have to. So if we had to start this in the Power 5 conferences, and I actually have a model where we developed a sixth conference, a non-affiliated conference with those great baseball schools that currently aren't in the Power 5 conference, like Rice, Wichita State, Cal State Fullerton, Houston, Coastal Carolina now, Central Florida, great baseball schools that aren't in the Power 5 conferences. So I think that would be, from a competitive standpoint, I think that'd be a lot of fun for fans out there who actually have shown that they love college baseball, but they haven't shown that they're going to come out and watch it or watch it on television. I think it's a tremendous model. So I think there's a lot of reasons to keep pushing for it. There's administrators out there listening too. I think there's huge advantages from the standpoint of we can graduate our kids in 4 years if they all take a summer class in each session. There's no such thing as giving out fifth-year aid anymore because all kids would graduate in 4 years. And from an APR standpoint, it would help our APR, our graduation rates. And for our kids that get into professional baseball, the number of kids that never come back and graduate college is astounding. That's part of my study. The year I did it, there were 824 Major League Baseball players on Major League rosters at the time. And of those 824 players, how many of them, let me ask you, how many of them would you think were four-year college graduates at the time that I did the study out of 824? How many would you think?
I would say a maximum of 30%.
There were 6 players in the major leagues that had 4-year college degrees. not 6%.
Right.
There were 6.
Right.
And I would think that Major League Baseball, with the horror stories that you hear about players going bankrupt after they play, that they would be encouraging these guys and hoping that they would become college graduates and have a life after baseball. So I think across the boards, there's reason for everybody to do this. I always end my proposal with this question. If we currently played college baseball in the summertime right now, and somebody came along and said, hey, I got a great idea. Let's move the season up to the second weekend in February. Somebody would say you've fallen out of your tree. Why would you move the season into the wintertime? Yeah, and that's what we do. We play 30% of our games in the wintertime. And it's crazy to me that now everybody's excited about the College World Series, and that's when people start watching college baseball, and that's when the season ends. Get that kind of excitement at the beginning of the season for opening day and for rivalry week. I just think there's so much out there that we're leaving on the table. If anybody wants to email me, it's randy.mazey@mail, M-A-I-L, .wvu.edu, and I'd love to I spend most of my time talking to coaches about it, but if there are administrators out there that see the value in it and want to discuss it with me, like I said, it's going to have to come out of the hands of the coaches for people to vote on what's best for the sport.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.